Well, good evening, folks, and my apologies for being a little late. I had a little Zoom connection problem, but that seems to have resolved itself. And I will call the Missoula City Council meeting of December 6th, 2021 to order. And it's going to take me a minute to do roll call here. In fact, Marty, could you do roll call for me? And that way I won't delay us further.
That'll work out great. Let's see here. I'll just call the roll from the top. Anderson. And it looks like she's not here yet. Becerra. Not here yet. Contos. We got a note that he wouldn't be here. Harp is here. Yes.
Present.
All right. Hess.
Present.
Jordan. Or excuse me, Jones.
Present.
Merritt.
Present.
Ramos.
Present.
Carol.
Present.
Zika.
Present.
And Von Lossberg.
Here.
And West.
Here.
Okay. We have anybody join after? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
And so we have all council members present, but for Mr. Contos, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Becerra, is that correct?
That's what I came up with, yes.
Yeah, great, thank you. We will approve our minutes if there is no objection. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the schedule of committee meetings. Ms. Raybon.
Hang on, Mr. Mary, you were not the only one that was on a little struggle this evening. So I didn't have the committee schedule pulled up yet. I was working on something else prior to the meeting. All right, here we go. Let me share my screen and I'll show folks how to get to our agendas online. So here we go. This is the main city webpage, and Google is your friend to find us online. Just Google the city of Missoula. It'll be right there at the top of your search results. When you get to our page, there are these buttons right here below this beautiful picture of our lovely city. You're going to want the meetings button, and that is going to take you to our meeting portal. And up here at the top, it says most recent committee meeting schedule. So if you click on that, that's a link that gets you to our most recent committee meeting schedule. And then in order to join any of the meetings, those are actually on the agendas themselves. And so you can see down here, we have a little calendar view. We're going to have committee meetings this coming Wednesday on the 8th of December. And if you click into a particular agenda, we'll have a little screen pop open here. And next to agenda, there's two hyperlinks. There's one that says HTML, one that says PDF. You can click either one of those, open up an agenda, and that'll take you to the meeting join information for that respective committee. There's a little link here to attend by computer. There are phone numbers to call in. If you have a landline, we have 800 numbers. So you don't incur toll charges to join our meetings. Webinar ID and password are things that Zoom will ask you for when you dial in. Always, you can watch us streaming right here on this page or on YouTube, or we are also on MCAT Spectrum cable channel number 190. Okay, all that's out of the way. Let's talk about the committee schedule. City Council is setting committee meetings for Wednesday, December 8th. Like this meeting, they are going to be held via Zoom webinar. And here is the schedule. I think we have one late breaking item that is coming to our committee schedule. I'll try to mention that when I get to it and let Amber talk about it in a little bit more depth. Land Use and Planning Committee is meeting this coming Wednesday, December 8th from 10 o'clock until noon. That's a 2-hour meeting. They will be talking about an annexation on Grant Creek Road, and they'll have an update to the city's growth policy, which is the city's development guide, our Missoula development guide, and it's a yearbook. This, folks, is pretty interesting statistics about the growth of our city during a look back period of 2018 to 2020. Administration, at least I geek out on stuff like that. Administration and Finance Committee meets from 12:30 to 1 o'clock. We'll be taking up the City Council's meeting schedule for next year and 2 appointments, one to a board and the other for my new boss, Chief Operating Officer, Eric Hallstrom. The Public Works Committee will meet from 1:15 to 2:30. And they have a couple of bid openings. They'll be considering a request to vacate a roadway easement and a utility easement through 44 Ranch. There are there's a development agreement in the Mullen Build area out off of Mullen Road. And an amendment to the interlocal agreement for the build area on Mullen Road, and a professional services agreement with an engineering firm called DJ&A for design changes to England Boulevard. And Parks and Conservation is going to round out the day. Amber, I take it you might want to have a little longer than 10 minutes. Is that true?
That is true. We probably need an extra 10 minutes.
Okay, so Parks and Conservation is going to start at 2:45, but they're not going to end at 2:45. I'm going to amend that after tonight's meeting. They'll go until 3:05. And so I'll make a change to this item right here. They're going to take up the Caras Park Trail and light purchase, the master fee schedule for Parks and Recreation, Parks and Recreation facility use, reservations, permits, and programs for 2022. And we have a late breaking referral this evening to award the bid for the West Side Park playground. I think that's what we call it, right, Amber? All right, so I'm going to be adding that on later on this evening after the meeting, but we did want to make sure that we mentioned it here tonight. And so when I issue the committee schedule after the meeting tonight, that will be an addition down here on the bottom. And I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any changes to the committee schedule this evening? All right. So, Ms. Sharp?
Is this when I need to do an addition, do the addition for the committee schedule, or should I do that a little later?
Let's do that. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I think we got it under new business this evening, don't we? We have something under.
Is that where they wound up putting it? We could not find it before the meeting. That's one of the reasons why I was so late and didn't have the committee schedule, whether we were trying to suss out what happened to this agenda item. It's not under new business. It's,
Ms. Cheryl, go ahead. We'll just get it on the record now.
Yeah.
Great. So I would like to add to the Parks and Conservation Committee meeting for this Wednesday to consider the playground equipment purchase and installation contract for the West Side Park.
Thank you. And the time is scheduled. So we are in business in that regard, and seeing no other changes to the committee schedule, we'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda this evening. And we've got a number of public hearings, so there will be certainly opportunities to comment on those items. And Mr. Wolverton.
Yes. Are you able to see me or no? This is only audio, correct?
Can't see you, but we can hear you, John. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, for taking a moment to listen. I'm zooming in tonight to basically ask the council and all the council members and the city to move forward as robustly as possible on the 100% clean electricity plan that was passed in 2019. It's imperative that we as a community, and as we know as a nation and globally, that we act very promptly on the concerns revolving around climate. It's more than concerns, it's turning into a catastrophe. And I think that we need to look at working on resiliency as well as mitigation, and the 100 clean electricity plan is a good step. I also want to encourage council in the future, when anything comes your way, to thoroughly scrutinize proposals for any installations of fossil fuel infrastructure, such as, say, filling stations. We also need to take a harder look at whether we're going to continue to allow developments with natural gas infrastructure for residential and commercial building. And that's something we got to really think about really hard, because we don't want to essentially allow ourselves to have a lot of stranded assets in the community. So this takes me back to concluding to say, please keep pushing on the 100% clean electricity plan. And thank you for your time and all your work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wolverton. Seeing no other hands raised for general public comment this evening, we will move on to our consent agenda. Items there were approved unanimously, generally speaking, in council committees, and we consider these items all at once to save a little time on Monday evenings. Ms. Rabine will read the list of consent agenda items aloud, so folks paying attention to this meeting in various formats will know what we're talking about and have opportunity to comment. Ms. Rabine.
Thanks, Mary Engen. Hang on just a second here. Wait for this schedule. Look it up. Get a little bigger here. All right, tonight's consent agenda has 11 items. I'm going to share my screen so folks watching at home might be able to read along with me. Here we go. All right, let me scroll back up here. Item number 1 is to approve claims or accounts payable in the amount of $708,597.32 for checks that are dated tomorrow, December 7th, 2021. Number 2 is to reappoint Tim Hall to serve on the Conservation District for a term that begins on January 1st of 2022 and ends on December 31st of 2025. Number 3 is to appoint Claire Battaglia to serve as a regular member on the Food Policy Advisory Board for a term that begins January 1st, 2022 and ends on March 31st of 2025. Number 4 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a contract with AVI Systems for purchase and installation of courtroom technology in the amount of $93,683.75. Number 5 is to approve and authorize Mayor Engen to sign a prorated 3-year maintenance support contract with AVI Systems, also for that courtroom display system in the amount of $12,521. Number 6 is to confirm the mayor's reappointment of Amy Sillenberg to the Missoula Urban Transportation District. We affectionately call that Mountain Line here in Missoula, for a term that begins January 1st of 2022 and expires on December 31st of 2025. Number 7, we're setting a public hearing on December 13th of 2021 on a resolution affirming the City Council's August 2021 decision to increase business license fees by 3% and correct the fee schedule attached to Resolution 8534. Because it's the last meeting of the year, we're asking council to actually take action the same night of the public hearing next week. So that'll be before you for hearing next week, as well as a final decision, council members. Number 8 is to authorize the mayor to sign and execute a contract with the Poverello Center for the provision of services and programs specific to people without a house in Missoula, and providing comprehensive outreach services to that same population funded by the city of Missoula in the amount of $211,476. Number 8 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign quotes number CERQ 95365 and CERQ 95761 from Cerium Networks for the purchase of Polycom equipment for 7 conference rooms and 3 courtrooms in the amount of $53,163.58. Number 10 is to adopt a resolution relating to $912,000 of storm water system revenue bonds consisting of 465,867 Series 2021B taxable bonds and $446,133 of Series 2021C bonds, authorizing issuance of those bonds and fixing the terms and conditions thereof. And finally, number 11 is to approve the Howard Razor Business Park Subdivision Phase 3 final plat.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Questions or comments from council members this evening? All right, seeing none, anyone in the audience care to comment on any of the items on the consent agenda tonight? And seeing none there, we will have a roll call vote.
Oh, okay, on the consent agenda, Harp,
Yes.
Hess. Hess is absent. Jones.
I'm sorry, I'm here. I was struggling with my audio. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Very, very apologetic. Hess votes yes. I haven't got to say that in rhyme for a really long time, so I appreciate the opportunity to. Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
Von Lossberg.
Yes.
And West.
Yes.
And would any of you like to change your vote? That is 9 ayes and 3 absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, nor the community forum this evening, nor do we have any special presentations. We do have a number of public hearings, pardon me, and state law and our own council rules set guidelines for inviting community comment on a variety of issues. And following a staff report on each of these, council will invite the public to comment. During COVID, we have been holding public hearings open for a week, and council then takes action at their next regular meeting, which would not be until the new year. And I may ask council without objection to think about adopting rates this evening so that our team can move forward with all of that. But we'll get there when we get there. Our first public hearing this evening is on, pardon me, a proposed annexation and zoning upon annexation at 3 addresses in Grant Creek. And Emily Gluckin has our staff report this evening.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay and see my screen okay?
We can.
All right. Good evening. My name is Emily Gluckin, and I am an associate planner in the Development Services Division of Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. Tonight, I will be presenting a request for annexation and zoning upon annexation. This request comes from IMEG on behalf of Diversified Real Estate LLC for 3 parcels located at 3719, 3721, and 3723 Grant Creek Road. There we go. Before we begin, I'd like to describe the regulatory parameters that we're working within for this request. State law in Montana codes annotated is our guiding document for this decision. In considerations of additions to city limits, City Council has the decision-making authority, and conditions may be imposed on annexation requests. Services must be provided to the annexed property, and a public hearing before City Council for zoning upon annexation requests is required. So that is why we're here this evening. The annexation request includes 3 parcels located at the southwest corner of Grant Creek Road and Howard Razor Drive. It is an area located between the Interstate, Reserve Street, and West Broadway. The parcel is entirely surrounded by city limits that's shown in pink on this map. Upon annexation, the properties would become part of City Council Ward 2 and the Grant Creek Neighborhood Council. The 3 parcels are a combined 3.32 acres that are all occupied by Diversified Plastics LLC and are surrounded by land that has been previously annexed into the city. The subject property is in Annexation Area A on the city annexation policy map. And areas that are designated as Area A largely meet the guidelines of the annexation policy and are identified by the annexation policy as priority areas for the city to annex. Using this annexation policy to determine if this annexation request is aligned with the purpose and criteria of the policy, staff evaluated whether the annexation would contribute to the logical growth pattern of the city or fill in gaps left by previous annexations that created islands, whether the annexation meets current city standards around infrastructure and the provision of services, and whether the annexation policy or whether the annexation request complies with city plans and policies, including the goals of the growth policy and other relevant adopted plans. So for some existing conditions of what's going on the site today, the property contains 4 existing buildings in which general manufacturing activities take place, including urethane manufacturing and injection molding. The property has frontage on Grant Creek Road and Howard Razor Drive. A curbside sidewalk exists on the portion of Howard Razor Drive that abuts the property, and there are currently no pedestrian facilities adjacent to the property on Grant Creek Road. Oh, went ahead. City water and city sewer are currently available adjacent to the property on Howard Razor Drive. And the property is currently not connected to these services and uses a private well and septic system. Following the proposed annexation, the applicant intends to construct a building addition that connects 2 buildings on the 2 northern parcels of this property, as well as creating improvements to the parking area that include the provision of 47 parking spaces and some parking lot landscaping. The applicant requests annexation into city limits in order to allow the site to have access to city water and sewer. This is because the proposed expansion of the buildings will require the site to have fire sprinklers, therefore connection to city water and access to that water is necessary. The Missoula 2035 growth policy recommends a land use designation of community mixed use. Areas designated as community mixed use are intended to integrate basic employment and services with main transportation corridors. They are characterized by a broad range of functions that include retail, education, financial institutions, professional and personal services, offices, residences, and general service activities. The relatable zoning districts as outlined in the growth policy are C14 neighborhood commercial, C24 community commercial, and M1R2 limited industrial and residential. This property is also located within the Reserve Street district of the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan area. The Reserve Street district is intended for a mix of corridor retail uses, including hotels, dining, entertaining, and office areas. In this plan, the specific property that we're looking at today has a recommended land use of transitional commercial, which is intended to accommodate office and corridor retail uses, as well as upper floor residential units. And this plan for North Reserve Scott Street also recommends specific right-of-way improvements and modifications to Howard Razor Drive and Grant Creek Road, as well as the intersection between those 2 roads. The current Missoula County zoning of the property is CI-2 heavy industry. This county zoning district allows commercial and industrial uses that include things like heavy manufacturing, processing, fabrication, and assembly of products or materials. The property is surrounded by both light to heavy industrial zoning districts that are in the city and the county, and community commercial city zoning districts. The proposed zoning upon annexation is M1-2 limited industrial, where a number of commercial, general industrial and agricultural uses are permitted, including the current use of general manufacturing, and residential uses are not permitted in this zone. There are no setbacks in this district if not abutting a residential district, and the maximum allowed building height is 50 feet. And any new development on site will be subject to any applicable zoning standards in addition to the standard ones for M1-2. So for things like landscaping or parking, those will be applied. Another part of the staff evaluation is the criteria for zoning upon annexation. Per Title 20, as well as state law, the zoning upon annexation request must meet one of the three criteria shown on screen. So in this case, staff determined that the request for zoning upon annexation of M1-2 limited industrial authorizes land uses that are comparable to the land uses authorized under the CI-2 county zoning classification, with the small exception of some intensive industrial land uses that are only permitted in the CI-2 district. The staff found that this criterion A was met. So even though the proposed zoning district is not aligned with the growth policy land use designation or the recommendations of the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan, staff finds that the change from a county industrial zoning district to a city industrial zoning district is appropriate. Staff recommends 6 conditions of approval for this annexation request. The first condition requires the installation of a fire hydrant adjacent to the northeast corner of the subject property. The second requires connection to city sewer, the abandonment of the existing septic system, and the installation of backflow prevention if the petitioner chooses to connect to city water. Staff recommended this proposed amendment for this condition that is also in memo number 1 that was sent to City Council. And based off of conversations between the applicant and city agencies, staff deemed this amendment to the original language that was in the staff report to be appropriate. The third condition describes required improvements to the intersection of Grant Creek Road and Howard Razor Drive. In memo number 1, staff also recommended an amendment to this condition from how it was originally written in the staff report, just to remove the word "and" for clarity. The fourth condition describes the requirements for half street improvements on Grant Creek Road to bring this road in closer compliance with municipal standards for city roads. The fifth condition requires improvements to the driveway entrance to the property off of Grant Creek Road. And the sixth condition requires the applicant to execute a waiver of SID for future improvements and maintenance to both Howard Razor and Grant Creek Road. And the purpose of this condition is to account for potential future right-of-way improvements or modifications that are in accordance with the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan. So to conclude, staff recommends the adoption of an ordinance to annex these 3 tracts of land and zone upon annexation to M1-2 limited industrial, subject to the 6 conditions of approval, including the 2 amendments that were described in memo number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gluckett. And with that, I am happy to open the public hearing. Does anyone care to comment on this proposed annexation and rezoning? And seeing none, are there questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none there, this public hearing will remain open for the foreseeable future until council meets again. And we'll move on to our second public hearing this evening, which is the adoption of the West Broadway Community Master Plan. And our staff report comes from Annette Marchessault this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Annette Marchessault. I am a project manager with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And I'd like to invite Rob Pietkowski, who is a planner with our planning consultants, Dover Cole and Partners, to join us as well. And Rob, while I'm introducing the project, perhaps you could pull up the presentation. We have a brief presentation about the master plan tonight. We are asking City Council to pass a resolution to adopt this master plan for the West Broadway area as an amendment to the downtown master plan, which is an amendment to the city growth policy. The master plan, a number of you have sat on the steering committee, so you're familiar with the process for this project. We started back in April, master planning for the area. Funding was provided through the Missoula Redevelopment Agency and a planning grant from the Big Sky Trust Fund, applied for by the Business Improvement District and administered through the Missoula Economic Partnership. Had a robust steering committee and really robust public engagement throughout the process. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rob to give a quick presentation about the master plan itself, and then we can open up for the public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Annette, and thank you, Mayor and Council. So we'll go through these slides somewhat quickly. For a lot of you, you may have seen this presentation or some version of it, but for those that haven't, I want to make sure we cover all the key points of the plan. As Annette mentioned, we began this process earlier this year in February with the project kickoff. We had our virtual charrette, which was our large public engagement process. April 5th to 9th happened mostly virtually online through Zoom and other means, but we also had 3 in-person events during that time. From there, we had our draft plan and framework for our plan, and we worked on filling it in over the following months. We had several virtual public presentations in October and November, and here we are now in December, moving towards plan adoption. Over this time, we've spoken to over 340 people or had their participation in one form or another in surveys, engaging online or meeting in person. We do the one-word card, asking one word that comes to mind about the area today and now, and the more times a word is submitted, the larger it is. And so this helps us get a snapshot of what those participating in the process think of the area. And you can see potential and forgotten are the ones that come up the largest. Similarly, when we ask the question about one word that comes to mind about the future, you can see much more positive words, really turning the potential into some actionable items, including community, gateway, affordable, and river. We had community image surveys and the virtual charrette. We had quite a robust input and helped us to understand what the community thought was important in terms of the physical attributes of the neighborhood, as well as the social and community aspects of it. We asked at the end of that 1 week charrette, what was, based on what you heard tonight, do you think the draft plan is on the right track? And 80% said yes, or probably yes. Several months later, at our virtual public presentation of the draft plan, we asked the same question. Based on what you heard tonight, do you think the updated draft is on the right track? And we were again at 80% yes, or probably yes, in terms of those who were in attendance and voting. The plan is available for review online on the website. We've kept this going the whole time, and we'll update this again with the latest numbers. So nearly 7,000 website visits, 2,500 unique views. We had several public comment periods on the master plan, and we've extended the master plan public participation process and timeline by a couple of months to make sure we hear as many voices as possible and to have a more robust experience or outreach process rather. Part of this was thanks to the work of crew and MRA working together to make sure that we really hear from all those, especially those in the more immediate neighborhood and community of the North Side, West Side area. We had a paper survey delivered door to door as well as available online. We had over 60 respondents, and it was really great because these are people we hadn't reached previously. So around 88% we hadn't heard from before, but still when we asked the plan recommendations for mixed use and walkable neighborhood center make sense for this area, 89% said yes. All of that work over the past months and the dedication of many, many people from Missoula, especially from North Side, West Side neighborhood and the steering committee resulted in the final draft that I'll walk through with you all tonight. The area is about 15 acres located between Clark Fork River, West Broadway Street, and North Russell Street, North California Street. Its project is following up on the West Broadway, the Missoula Downtown Master Plan, which was adopted in November of 2019. In this plan, talks about this area, the West Broadway Gateway area, it called it, and talks about adding new housing opportunities, adding affordable retail and restaurant space, redesigning intersections, and making crossings of West Broadway Street easier and safer and more comfortable. It talks about orienting buildings to face Broadway Street, adding new sidewalks, and extending the riverfront trail. And so all of that, we continued on and refined to a higher level of detail and more specificity in this planning process. And this process started because of changing conditions on the ground. The city has ownership of several parcels within the study area. There's a greater need for affordable housing now more than ever. And the site's located within an urban renewal district and opportunity zones, both of which provide new and extra funding sources to help advance the ideals of this plan. So taking everything that we've heard from the public and from the previous planning processes, we came up with these 5 big ideas to guide the plan. And these ideas are what should continue forward. While the specifics of the plan may change over time, these should hold true. And we'll walk through each one of these in a little more specific detail. So if you open up the plan, you download it from the website. It's also available at several locations throughout the city in hard copy. When you pick it up, you'll see that for each of the big ideas in the plan, it has a spread like this that outlines the key elements and the key policies and strategies. The first big idea is to build the next great Missoula neighborhood center. This talks about a complete urban place, creating high quality and welcoming public spaces for all, and safe, comfortable, and interesting streets. So really, this portion of the document talks about the urban design, how the place could physically take form, and including a mix that's balanced between housing and working spaces and shopping and recreation. And it also includes several strategies to make sure that the area accommodates all of the residents and all of those residing in the North Side, West Side neighborhoods. So it includes several strategies and guides and policies on the urban design, what makes a good space, a comfortable space from that perspective. One of the key elements is creating a new main street that runs perpendicular off of West Broadway Street. And this happens on city-owned land, and so there's a lot of control over the ultimate design of the space. What happens along West Broadway is a little more ambiguous because of it's a state highway. So by creating the perpendicular street, you can have high control over the quality of the design and the space and make sure that it functions and serves the needs of the community. And the area is recommended to be designed such that the whole street can be turned into a pedestrian plaza for special events such as a maker's fair or food truck rally or community block party. The plan also includes several street sections, how to modify the existing streets within the study area using more incremental approaches. So making sure curbs stay where they are and adding traffic calming features and ensuring that there's sidewalks, street trees, on-street parking, and slower travel speeds. So cyclists and cars and trucks as needed can all make use of the streets, but all be comfortably and safely done. So these are for Cedar Street, Hillsdale Street, and also North California Street. Big idea too is to be a good neighbor and respect the local businesses currently on site. There's a lot of businesses within the study area, and a lot of these have been there for a long time, sometimes several decades. And so the plan assists in the improvement of businesses along West Broadway Street, It makes the option for redevelopment available to private property owners while allowing local businesses to remain. And thanks to the survey that we worked with MRA and crew on, we were able to hone in on what some of the local serving uses that are desired by the community and what those might include, such as local restaurants and cafes, a daycare, a laundromat, community space, incubator and shared kitchen spaces for food-related startups or light manufacturing, corner store and grocer, and art studio. And the plan really intends for this to become a local destination, having uses that serve the local community, places where people can walk or bike to meet their daily needs, and for a place for the community to meet. So the plan talks about encouraging local ownership, assisting retail and locally owned businesses, and establishing a maker district here, building upon the existing light industrial uses in the area and the entrepreneurial spirit of the neighborhood. And we've also added in somewhat recently, since one of the earlier drafts, some specific strategies on how to do that, how to promote small businesses and local businesses within the area. Next is big idea 3, connect to the river and complete the path system. This means to increase access to parks and nature, connect to the river and complete the path system and build sustainably. There are some parks in the area, and in 2020, Downtown Lions Plan Park, an update to that was adopted, and that will include a playground and community garden. And so this plan recognizes that and proposes to include complementary park features within this area, since Downtown Lions Park is just next door. The plan talks about opportunities to transform the Flynn Lowney ditch at the terminus of the Long Green along the river into more usable park space, such as lawns and community gardens. This Long Green is really one of the key urban design and park features of the plan. It stretches from West Broadway Street all the way down to the Clark Fork River, and along different segments of it, there's different activities that are proposed to happen. In this section, this is really the heart of the community, or the neighborhood center rather, where there's businesses and shops lining a new green space, spaces for outside dining, which is important, as we now know over the last couple of years, but also spaces for people who aren't going to the businesses or aren't dining out, just places for people to sit down and enjoy spending time in public or reading a book without having to go to be shopping or dining at a restaurant, just benches and tables and so on. Working away further south, there's space for playground or small climbing feature, as well as an overlook to increase views of the waterfront. And the plan also talks about increasing the width of the trail and adding shade trees and lighting to improve security at nighttime. Green infrastructure is an important part of the plan. The plan talks specifics about several different types of green infrastructure and where it can be located. And biking is again an important feature of this document, as Missoula works towards achieving its ambitious mode share and mode split, as included in the long range transportation plan. Ensuring that this area is accessible by bicycling is really important. So that includes connecting the trail, making sure the missing link along the north side of the river is filled in, as well as including long-term and short-term bicycle parking. For sustainability practices, the plan talks about sustainable buildings, zero waste facilities, making sure there's space for landfill, as well as compostable and recycling material, recyclables, and reducing energy consumption by encouraging solar panels and other renewable energy sources on site. Big idea 4 is probably the most important part of this plan, and that's to help solve housing and rental space affordability issues within the city. As you're aware of, housing costs have gone up tremendously in the city, more than doubling since 2011. And so this plan includes a detailed set of strategies as to how affordable housing can be incorporated within the site, and hopefully more broadly applicable to other parts and other developments that may happen across Missoula. These are broken down into zoning strategies, such as reducing parking requirements for affordable housing, reduce the minimum unit size. I should say that all the strategies on these pages and the next slide I'll show are all recommended for the creation of permanently affordable housing, and not just any development in general. Next is to streamline development approvals and entitlement processes, and to explore options to minimize impact fees as possible under state law. So this might include reimbursing these fees for those projects that include permanently affordable housing. The plan also talks about different financing and funding opportunities, low-income housing tax credits, utilizing TIF, again, the areas within the urban rural district. So there's TIF funding available to help construct public infrastructure and open space, as well as to incentivize affordable housing on privately held parcels. There's funding possibly from the City of Missoula Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and to look into new market tax credits. Probably one of the most important parts and opportunities, and one of the reasons why this plan was brought forward in this process, was because of the city-owned land. City ownership of several parcels within the study area provides an opportunity to directly pursue development that will implement the plan vision and key goals. Development can be very expensive, and land is a big cost, along with materials and labor and the entitlement process. So by being able to take out one of those huge costs, those savings can then be passed along in terms of lower rent and lower sale prices. And so the plan recommends several strategies for utilizing that cost-saving potential in terms of following a public-private partnership with the developer, partnering with a nonprofit developer or community land trust, and also coordinating with Missoula Housing Authority. And the plan also talks about supporting existing tenants and assistants, and has affordable housing targets. And these affordable housing targets are based on area median income, AMI. And the plan recommends 50 to 70 permanently affordable housing units on the site. And 35% of those for households earning up to 30% of AMI, 35% of those for households earning between 30% and 80% of AMI, and 30% for households earning between 80 and 120% of AMI. And the AMI fluctuates, it's updated yearly, and also depends on the size of the household. The larger the household, the higher the AMI will be. And the last big idea is creating a unique entry experience into urban Missoula. Right now, as one travels through and passes through this area, especially from approaching from the west, it's not really possible to tell that you're within the urban core of Missoula and that there's such great neighborhoods just a block off of West Broadway Street. And so first impressions matter. And this section of the plan talks about creating a new gateway experience and a sense of arrival at the intersection with West Broadway Street and North Russell Street, and reimagining West Broadway Street. One of the changes to the plan from the last time we presented is adding some clarifying language that these recommendations for West Broadway Street require further study and coordination with the Montana Department of Transportation. So MDT, the Montana Department of Transportation, is in a process of designing and rebuilding West Broadway Street. And so this plan recommends key enhancements to their designs to ensure that pedestrian and cycling safety is enhanced, both along and crossing, especially a pedestrian crossing with flashing beacon at Burn Street, and a roundabout at North California Street, Toole Avenue, and West Broadway Street. So again, these are things that will require further coordination and study and working together with MDT and the MPO and the city. And this is the illustrative plan, and this kind of depicts the potential future build out for the West Broadway area, the overall vision for the entire 15 acres. The dark gray rectangles are the existing buildings, the green is existing or new public space, and the reddish pink are proposed or possible new buildings. So a lot of this, what's shown here, is really big picture ideas. What actually gets built and implemented over time will really depend on individual property owners and them following their own goals and their own visions on their land. The hope is that through the right incentives and the right regulations, these individual actions will all come together and form a cohesive whole in terms of what's shown here in this vision. But it's important to walk through this in a phasing process to understand how it could be built out over time, and really highlighting these areas shown in orange. These are areas where the city owns land, whether it's the Sleepy Inn site or the Missoula water site. And this is where the plan can happen the quickest, as well as following the ideals shown in these illustrative plans and renderings. The first things to possibly change are West Broadway Street itself and the Missoula and the Sleepy Inn site. Next, one can imagine the Missoula water site redeveloping. And just within these couple phases, a new complete place can be formed with a new public square, lots of new space for retail and new businesses to come in, and offices for community services, as well as new residential uses. Next, we can imagine the Long Green extending further south down to the Clark Fork River and properties along the river redeveloping. And lastly, in the long term, the private properties in between these other city-owned areas can redevelop as well. Bringing it all together, the overall development plan, which is through phase 3, which was this one right here, recommends 20 to 30,000 square feet of leasable space for retail and restaurants, especially local ones, 10 to 15,000 square feet of space for offices and community spaces, 100 to 130 market rate townhomes and apartments, and 50 to 70 affordable units targeted to the following income brackets. Parking is an important part of the plan, and most of the parking is recommended to be on street or mid-block, so behind the buildings on surface parking lots. But depending on how much is built in the area, additional parking might be needed in terms of structured parking. And also, it's important to support this plan and the other city plan goals towards increasing transit, walking, and biking mode share to reduce the need for parking. And lastly, the plan talks about the implementation process, and for each of the big ideas includes specific strategies and action items for getting there. And next steps in our approval process on our schedule is for final action next Monday, 6 p.m. and then Big Sky submitting the final plan to the Big Sky Trust Fund at the end of the month. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and and thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And I am happy to open the public hearing on the West Broadway master plan. A couple of items to note, however, apparently I can't read a calendar, so forgive me. Council will be meeting next week. We'll take these items up under final consideration then. So again, these public hearings will remain open. And I am checking to see if there is any comment this evening. And I see, oh, Mr. Wolverton.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
We can, yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks again. I thought I'd hang around for this because I think this is a really important step for the west side of our city. My name is John Wolverton. I didn't mention earlier, I'm in Ward 6 on 8th Street, very near Catlin. And because of some of this stuff that I've been observing over the years happening along Russell Street, and that, you know, that's sort of an extension of the activities and the energy that happens along West Broadway, I paid a lot closer attention to this plan than you might expect, considering I live in another neighborhood. I really think this is a really good plan overall. I really appreciate the work that the consultants put into this and all the people that showed up. And I heard a lot of good suggestions. And there was a lot of people present that seemed like there was people from very diverse backgrounds. I really like the product, the human scale representations, the interior block of parking, zero lot line development, the respect of the river, and particularly the usable public green spaces that are basically like plazas. So if this city can make this stuff happen, this is going to be really good for that neighborhood and really good for all of us. I also really appreciate the addition of the West Broadway suggestions that I hope the city will work on with MDT and get a lot better bicycle and pedestrian facilities along West Broadway and in the vicinity of this project. So I had, some of you might have heard in my comments during the process, and I wanted something that I want the council members and city to consider when it comes to our city-owned lands is that we ought to think about how our social service organizations, the social service outlets, and our affordable housing, residential units for affordable housing get arrayed across the city, because there seems to be a pattern emerging that they're all they're all happening generally in 2 or 3 very distinct areas of the city. And one of the suggestions I put in, not that this is, I know that this plan has its own trajectory now, but the city should consider selling property that they own, such as this, potentially because it could benefit from higher intensity use than mostly residential. Maybe it would be better as commercial retail, more of that than residential, or land swapping with developers. And the point of this really is so we don't have income stratification across our community, that we don't end up with all the poor people living basically along Broadway and down Russell Street. So, but it is a good plan. I support it. I recommend adopting it. I do have one particular concern that I identify as a flaw where we can move the needle on how we develop, and it has to do with the street cross sections that are represented on pages 87 and 89, particularly the Hillsdale cross section in California. That's basically the measurements as represented in those the sections between on the right of way, that the basically the parking lanes and the car travel lanes are excessively wide. Even one street even suggests that we'd have to take 5 more feet in order to accomplish that. And if you look at it, there's basically de facto 10-foot parking lanes, which is more than enough. There's a representation of up to 12-foot travel lanes, which is unnecessary, and also that encourages speeding. So we want to take this as an opportunity to shift the paradigm away from car-dominated public spaces. And I would suggest to reduce any references to parking lane widths down to 8 feet, including the curb and gutter, and then, or the gutter that is, and then reduce the travel lane width representations to 10 feet. One of the reasons this has become kind of dear to me is that I was involved modestly with Public Works when they redesigned Catlin Street, which is very close to where I live. And I wasn't paying close enough attention, and I missed that they basically installed 12-foot travel lanes here. And now we have to live with speeding traffic for however long this infrastructure lasts. So reducing the travel lanes down to 10 feet would help calm down the neighborhood. And then I know that we run up against this concern from emergency services that they're worried that they can't pass by each other in case of an emergency. And the irony is that we design streets wide for the emergency services. You end up having to have more emergency service to respond to the collisions because people are speeding on wide streets. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Support the plan. Appreciate your time. And Mr. Mayor, I want to check and make sure I get muted as soon as I say goodbye, right? So I can turn
yes.
my music. I can turn my music on now.
You sure can. You
Okay.
bet, John.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I see no additional hands raised among our attendees, so I will ask if council members have any questions or comments before we move to our next presentation. Ms. Hart, and I think if you raise your hand through the Zoom, I can actually see it this week. So you're
I don't know
welcome
if
to
it's
that.
working again, John. Let me.
Oh, really?
Sorry. Yep, I took it down just now. Let me put it back up. Do you see that?
I don't. Okay.
Interesting. All right.
Please
We get to do
please
the
raise
wave
your hand.
dance.
Forgive me.
Okay. All right. Rob, thank you again for that great presentation. Since the first time you did it in committee and tonight I've been thinking about this a lot, so I have some questions. But first of all, as a tongue-in-cheek kind of question, are there actually any communities that ever say they would prefer an auto-centric kind of community over a walkable city?
There are.
There are.
We tend to not work in some of those places just because we prefer the walkable ones, but there are places that they like having their auto accessible places, and that works for them. So
Okay.
we like working
All
with
right.
you all in Missoula.
Well, it's good to know that there are options inside of America that, depending upon what kind of community you want, we have choices. So I guess my next question is, what will it actually take in terms of trade-offs as a community to actually live up to our ideals for a walkable city?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And really, a lot of it comes down to parking. And so parking is a big issue, no matter where you are in the country. It's the thing that comes up. And in many ways, it's the primary design factor behind our cities, is accommodating all the parking that's needed. And it's a catch-22. The more parking you accommodate, the less comfortable, the less inviting it is to travel by walking or biking or transit. And so as a community, you really need to make sure that all modes are invested in. And over the last several decades, most money has gone towards highways and roads and parking. And so obviously those are the choices people will make. But by investing more resources in other modes, making places safer for walking and biking and transit, those will become more viable options for people, things that are convenient and dignified. So you have a nice bus shelter to wait in. You're not standing in the rain next to a puddle in the street, or you have designated bike lanes. And Missoula is doing a great job in this regards. You have a great bike network, trail network. You have the Fairview Transit on Mountain Lion, and really working towards those types of goals. And so it'll have to be a continuation of that. I think Missoula has all the right pieces in place, but it'll take a little more time and effort to keep working at it, and recognizing that people will still need to drive. Not everyone can walk or bike, or they have certain needs where they might need to drive, or that's just what they prefer to do. But it's making sure that all these different modes are have the same level of choice in terms of being all being choice-worthy modes of getting around town.
Great. Mayor, will you indulge me a couple more questions?
If they're actually about the plan, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Inside of the plan, you made some recommendations in terms of for our community to get closer to our affordable housing goals. In this particular, in what you recommended was reducing unit sizes and parking requirements, just like you spoke to, and minimizing impact fees and streamlining development approval. Was there ever a consideration in terms of reducing minimum lot size as well?
I think in this particular instance, not so much, just because of the zoning that it is, can already build quite intense, and it's likely to be townhomes or apartments and condos. But that's a strategy that can be applied in areas where there's going to be more single-family homes. So that's a good point to bring up.
Great. And my very last question. So with density such as this that is proposed in this particular area, in light of what's been going on recently in other projects around town, with this kind of density, how many stories would we have to anticipate in order to accommodate 100 to 130 market rate homes and 50 to 70 affordable housing units, in addition to the other workspaces and shops?
Right. So in the plan, it talks about 4 to 5 stories.
Right. Thank you for indulging me.
You bet. Further questions, comments? All right, seeing none, once again, thank you for that great presentation and the hard work from our friends at MRA and Dover Cole. We'll take this item up next week. And our third public hearing this evening is on resolution of the Missoula City Council increasing municipal stormwater, wastewater, and water rates for those city-owned utilities. And I think we're going to start with Mr. McGinnis. I will offer a couple of comments in advance. Council members have heard this in committee, and I will just say for the record this evening, and for the audience that may be listening, we have both tremendous opportunity and tremendous responsibility in maintaining, pardon me, and improving these critical utilities that really make life and life as we know it, at least, possible in the city of Missoula. As you all know, we were able to acquire the city's water system from a private owner in 2017, and I won't belabor that process, but the reason we did that is to ensure that that critical community asset was taken care of, not only for the folks who are using that water today, but for many, many generations to come. And as a function of that, we need to make investment. Our rates are, as you'll see in this presentation, our rates today are comparable and lower than rates in many other communities around the state against whom we benchmark. And the difference between what we will be doing as a function of a rate increase versus what the private owner would have been doing as a function of rate increase, which, by the way, that private owner had a fairly well-established pattern of increasing rates year over year, in some cases 5% a year, all for largely for the purpose of increasing revenues and return on investment. Your investment, which is what your rates are in this system, user fees and investment, will go directly to supporting the system and improving that system, which when we acquired it, in the case of water, leaked about half of what it pumped. We believe we have an obligation to bring this system to an industry standard, and we're doing that in a thoughtful and measured way. This increase for water, again, is directly reinvested in the system to ensure that it operates well today and well into the future. Wastewater is sometimes something that we take for granted, but the fact of the matter is that if we were each operating on our own septic system in this community, that water we drink would be much different. The treatment would be much different, and the consequences to the community would be much different. So sanitary sewer is an essential component of modern life. And again, we take our stewardship of that system and our responsibilities as a polluter very seriously. So as we make improvements to that system and we innovate, we are protecting the Clark Fork River, we're protecting the aquifer that supplies our drinking water, and we're taking lots of nutrients out of the system, as well as in parts of the world where there is no sanitary sewer, all manner of disease and other challenges. So wastewater is a big deal and something we take for granted, but we need to continue our investment there, and we do so in ways that are, again, measured and thoughtful. And finally, our stormwater utility, which is relatively new, largely a product of federal regulation, but I think that regulation was appropriate, further ensures that the water resources that we depend on for not only drinking and bathing and all the other things that we use potable water for, pardon me, that that aquifer is protected and the river is protected, as all of the stuff from that we produce as people who live every day doesn't further sully these resources that we appreciate so much, including the Clark Fork River, which has tremendous environmental and recreational value. So with all that, I am happy to introduce this topic and this thoughtful approach to managing those systems over the long haul.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jeremy Keene. I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility. I'll just kick us off here with a few words, and then I'll hand off to Deputy Director Logan McGinnis and our consultant Melanie Hobart with FCS Group. As the mayor said, we have a strong commitment to providing affordable, reliable utility services to our community. And in order to do this, we have to be responsible stewards for these systems and for the environment that they protect. Our job is to keep the costs down, but we also have to ask when necessary to keep these systems running well. And that's what we're doing tonight. Our primary challenges that we face with our utilities are that they are aging systems and that we're seeing increased costs. We've historically not kept up with replacement needs, so we're relying on infrastructure now that's well past its intended life. Our folks do a great job of keeping that stuff going, but at some point it will break and we will need to replace it. So being proactive about replacing that infrastructure will help us avoid more costly emergencies and disruptions. And we need to invest in new technology to make us more efficient and more sustainable in the way we run those systems. And like everyone, we're seeing increased costs for labor, materials, energy. We rely on skilled, experienced operators to run these systems, and these systems require materials and power to run. We saw a CPI increase this year of over 5%. That's not a new trend. That's something that in some areas, like healthcare benefits, we've seen for a number of years. So we're doing a little bit of catch up. This was part of our FY22 budget request that you all looked at and approved in August. We proposed these as mid-year rate increases starting in January, and we propose to spread these over 3 fiscal years to lessen that immediate impact and provide more predictability for our customers. So thank you for your consideration tonight. I'm going to hand off to Logan and he'll take you through the details.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. My name is Logan McInnes. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Utilities. A little overview on utility rates. The fees that our residents pay allow an abundant supply of high quality drinking water, as well as water and stormwater services that protect the rivers and streams and aquifer that make our community special. So the fees cover the cost of providing these utility services. An average metered residential customer in Missoula pays about $60 a month for their water, wastewater, and stormwater services combined. For comparison, the typical cable TV bill is about $45 a month. Cell phone bill is probably at least $50 a month. And typical internet bills around $75 a month. So we think we provide incredible value for the $60 a month investment that our customers are making in these utilities. A little bit of background on the utility rates. You know, the bar chart at the bottom compares our combined utility rates with all the other big cities in Montana. This is a study done every year by the consulting firm of AE2S. And there are certain things they assume to make one-to-one comparisons between communities. These aren't necessarily our actual costs. They assume 6,000 gallons per month of water, wastewater consumption. So that's to make a apples to apples comparison. So as the chart shows, Missoula is nearly at the lowest rates in Montana when you combine all the utilities. Our current water rates are a bit less than they were approved in 2011. So, in the same period of time as Jeremy talked about the CPI, it's gone up 20% in that same time period, and our rates haven't changed. Wastewater rates have not increased since 2015. And our current stormwater rates were established in FY20 after a rate study provided by the FCS group. So again, as you'll see in the bar chart, our combined rates using the AE2S methodology is about $60.21 a month. Just a bit higher than the lowest, which is Great Falls. So why are we asking to raise these utility rates? We need to address inflationary cost increases. Everything from energy, supplies, equipment, and labor costs are going up across the board. We need to add full-time employees to address the growth that we're seeing in our community. and to further the mission of the utilities to provide drinking water and clean wastewater and stormwater. We need to further invest in sustainable infrastructure to reduce water leakage, to improve our wastewater treatment processes, to continue diverting nutrients from the Clark Fork River to avoid algae blooms, and to remove pollutants from our urban runoff in our stormwater. We want to prioritize reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from our water and wastewater utilities, which generate 58% of the city's emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, the water utility, a little overview. Missoula Water provides excellent customer service and produces some of the highest quality drinking water in the state of Montana. The DEQ views us as one of the best operated systems in Montana. They've told us that a number of times. Our facilities can meet the community's needs for domestic and fire protection water into the foreseeable future, 24 hours per day, 365 days per year. And our customers know that the water from the tap is healthy and that we rigorously test it as required by the state and federal law. A little bit of background on our water utility rates. Again, as the mayor described, the water utility was acquired from Liberty Utilities in 2017. And we're still charging the rates they had in place, which are less than what was adopted in 2011. As the mayor also said, Liberty Utilities, we know, plan to raise rates about 5% a year. And in the 4 years we've owned it, we haven't changed the rates at all. We've increased investment in maintenance staff and in capital spending. So when you compare our water to the cost of bottled water, our customers pay about 0.4 cents per gallon compared to $1.15 per gallon of bottled water, or it's about 287 times more expensive than our water. So another chart from the AE2S study down here, Missoula water rates are relatively high in Montana, and particularly when you compare us to groundwater systems, which the pound sign for us old people, I guess it's got a different name now, but those are for groundwater systems. So we're the highest groundwater system in Montana. And that's a factor of long-term private ownership of the system. That's all I had to say here. So the AE2S study says that our average metered residential water rate is about $40.56 per month when using that 6,000 gallon per month comparison. What will these increased water rates be used for? We want to work toward our goal of replacing 1% of water mains each year. That assumes a pipe you put in the ground can last 100 years. Recently, and prior to our ownership, it was about 0.3% per year of replacement. In FY22, we're targeting about 0.6% per year of replacement. So still not quite at that goal, but we are building toward it. We'll be replacing about 2.3 miles of water mains in Missoula this year. Another goal is to complete our implementation of our advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI system, by 2024. These new water meters will provide customers with real-time information about their water usage through a customer portal that we will be developing once we get enough of these new meters installed to make it worth having that portal in place. And this system is going to reduce vehicle miles needed to gather meter reads. It used to be every month we had to drive every street to pick up meter reads. So our hope is to collect more than 90% of these just through radio transmissions. We'll still have to do some reading, but we're going to significantly reduce FTE time and fuel used for gathering meter reads. We're going to invest in new storage tanks, transmission mains, and water supply wells. And lastly, invest in new technology to find water leaks. Talk a little bit about the wastewater utility now. We're providing our customers with an incredibly high value for about $16 a month currently. The system protects the Clark Fork River by removing pollutants such as 98% of suspended solids and biochemical oxygen demand, more than 93% of the phosphorus that enters the plant, and more than 80% of the nitrogen that enters the plant. The resource recovery facility converts organic material and sewage to methane and compost, which reduces our energy bills and provides the compost product used throughout Western Montana. Our poplar plantation that you're probably all aware of, it diverts more than 1,000 pounds of phosphorus and 10,000 pounds of nitrogen from the river every year, which reduces algae blooms that can happen in the Clark Fork River. Some background on wastewater rates. Again, current wastewater rates are same as they were in 2015. The same time period, the CPI has risen 14%. And as the bar chart at the bottom shows, our rates are 50% lower than the next lowest city in Montana. We implemented a new flow-based wastewater rate structure in FY21. Our intention was for that to be rate neutral, but due to a variety of factors, mostly related to the pandemic, our revenue actually decreased by about $500,000. So a big chunk of the rate increase is just to get us back to where we were prior to that new rate structure. So again, at the bottom, based on the AE2S study, they show us about $15.44 a month currently. What will these increased wastewater rates be used for? Again, offset that reduction in revenue I just mentioned. We want to rehab or replace 3 lift stations and develop plans for 2 more lift station rehab projects in FY22. We need to improve our UV disinfection system and other systems at the resource recovery facility. We want to upgrade and expand Garden City compost facility to meet stricter DEQ requirements that we've agreed to. Again, our goal is to decrease Public Works and Mobility's greenhouse gas emissions by 10% over the next 5 years. One way we're going to do that is to complete a third-party financing package for a 500 kilowatt solar farm at the resource recovery facility, which will be implemented in 2022 and will take advantage of a 26% federal tax credit that's in place that the third-party financiers can benefit from. And we need to study land application alternatives so that we can continue to divert unwanted nutrients from the Clark Fork River. On to the Stormwater Utility. We strive to protect Missoula's water quality and comply with state and federal water quality regulations. We've been working hard to identify and map all of the stormwater infrastructure that's in the ground throughout our city. We're ramping up our inspections of construction sites to reduce the erosion that can be discharged to our water bodies. We're working to complete projects to improve the quality of stormwater discharge to both the Clark Fork and Bitterroot rivers in the Missoula aquifer. And these rivers are both considered to be impaired, so by sediments and nutrients and other factors. So we need to do better with the water that we're discharging. We are striving to improve our compliance with the city's municipal separate storm sewer system permit, or our MS4 permit, which is driven by the Clean Water Act. We're working to maintain and recertify 4 accredited levees and 1 high hazard dam. We're training contractors to improve construction site stormwater runoff. And we're educating the community on the importance of eliminating pollution from our urban runoff. And one thing I want to point out about the levees and the high hazard dam, we're the only stormwater utility in Montana that has that responsibility. The others are focused solely on stormwater, but we have those additional duties that other utilities do not have. Talk a little bit about the stormwater utility rates. The utility began with a low initial rate in 2018, and then the current rate structure was set in FY20 with an average residential rate of $4.21 per month. And again, the bar chart from the AE2S study puts us about in the middle of the communities in Montana. And like I mentioned, we take on those levees and high hazard dams, and that's a significant part of the work that our stormwater utility performs. So what will these increased stormwater rates be used for? We want to construct capital projects such as the Karis Park project pictured to the right. And it looks a lot different now if you've driven over the bridge there. It's actually already done, and the stormwater is now being injected into the ground rather than discharged directly to the river. We're also working on a South Hills storm drainage project. We were successful in achieving an ARPA grant, so we have some need to provide some matching funds for that, but it's a little over a $2 million project. We need to continue expanding maintenance of our stormwater infrastructure, cleaning dry wells, inlets, and sediment basins. We need to do more work at jetting out storm mains. They haven't received the kind of attention that our sanitary sewer system has over the years, so we need to put more effort into cleaning these things out. We want to continue installing infrastructure to remove stormwater pollutants before they enter our local water bodies. And expand maintenance on the 4 FEMA accredited levee systems that we are responsible for. These protect property from flooding, and they provide the benefit of reduced flood insurance rates for the properties that are behind them. So some things that came up when we came to the Public Works Committee. The question, well, what if the rate increases are not approved? What happens? So we would need to continue to defer necessary maintenance and capital projects on all of these utilities. Deferred maintenance can lead to system failures, impacts to surface and groundwater quality, and ultimately can endanger public health. Water leakage rates would very likely increase even further. For our wastewater utility, we would likely result in staff reductions, reduced levels of service, and could ultimately lead to compliance issues with our Clean Water Act discharge permit. And for our stormwater, issues with our MS4 permit as well. I think there were questions about sustainability, in the Public Works Committee. So I've talked about a lot of these things, but I just want to talk a little bit more. What are we doing to become more sustainable? For wastewater, electricity used to pumps and our wastewater treatment equipment is by far our biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. I mentioned previously the solar farm, which is projected to produce 650 megawatt hours per year of renewable energy, which would offset 20% of the power consumption from our main electrical feed at the resource recovery facility. For water, 50% of our energy usage is a result of leakage. And we're ramping up investments in main replacements and in technology to find and fix leaks as well. Water is also planning to replace inefficient pumps and intending or working towards plans to develop a new well site where we can take advantage of Missoula Electric's mostly carbon-free power portfolio. So that'll lead to a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as well. So again, we're targeting a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10% over the next 5 years. And a few questions, I wouldn't call them frequently asked questions, but a few questions came up in the last couple of weeks from customers from the community. So we wanted to help address some of those things. So one of the questions, why can't the federal infrastructure funds be used to avoid these rate increases? These funds are generally only available for capital projects and are not intended to offset operational expenses, which is a big part of the rate increases that are needed. We have received some funds. We've got $10 million in ARPA minimum allocation funds for water and wastewater. So that's, those funds are allowing us to do a bunch of projects that would either have to they would have to be postponed, or it would lead to even larger rate increases. So these federal infrastructure funds are helping, and they'll continue to help. We're going to continue to work hard to apply for more of them. And we certainly have hopes that the infrastructure bill is going to lead to some principal forgiveness on some of our SRF borrowing. So they will lead to lower rates over time. And questions about how these average rates are calculated and why are they less than my bill? And of course, these bills vary depending on the property that you live in and the amount of water you consume. And it's less about how many people live in your house and more about how much irrigation water that you choose to put on your lawn in the case of water bills. Questions, will these changes to utility rates affect which utilities I'm going to be charged for? And no, you're still going to be charged for the same utilities you currently pay for. Your rates are just going to go up a bit. And again, why are rates going up faster than the CPI? Well, we need to keep up with inflation, of course, as well as increase our replacement of aging infrastructure. And as we've talked about, we haven't changed rates in years, so we've got a lot of catch up to do with previous inflation that we've already experienced. This last one is about the second public hearing item. So I guess I'll address it now if that's okay. So there's, after this hearing, we have a hearing about a tap fee and a staff assistance fee. So the tap fee is an existing fee. We're actually reducing the fee from what it is now, but the customer is going to be providing some of the tapping materials. So they have more control to get it ordered in a timely manner. We've had a lot of issues with delays of tapping saddles and that kind of thing. So the water tap fee only applies when you're making a new connection to the water main and would not be charged, not going to affect anybody's monthly utility bill. And it's a fee that contractors are already paying. Now, the staff assistance fee, that's only going to apply to contractors and developers that request staff assistance with additional testing of water mains. And that's not going to affect anybody's monthly water bill either. So I can pause for any questions that have arisen.
You know, we'll keep plugging, please, Mr. McGinnis, and then we'll take council questions when we're clear of the entire presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So next I would like to introduce Melanie Hobart from the FCS group. Melanie has 14 years of public sector and consulting experience. She's completed dozens of rate studies for water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities throughout the Northwest. FCS Group is an industry leader in providing financial, economic, and management consulting services for the private sector. They've performed more than 3,000 utility, finance, and rate development projects for state and local governments. So with that, I have Melanie's slides. Melanie, do you want me to flip them, or would you like me to stop sharing and let you share them yourself?
It works either way. I'm happy to do it myself if that works for you.
That's fine. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. All right. All right. Can everybody see my slides now?
We can.
Excellent. Okay. So I want to start say thank you, Logan, for the introduction. Most of you have seen me before. I'm here today to talk about the recommended kind of 3-year updates to the water, sewer, and stormwater rate adjustments. I also have with me Angie. She's the principal and vice president on this project at FCS Group. So she is here as well if any questions come up. But let's get started. So to begin, I want to start with a very high level on what is utility rate making. Utility rates are on a very basic level set to recover the cost of providing service. And Logan did a really great job of describing what those needs are and what they are going forward. There are 2 types of primary costs that a utility incurs. The first is operating costs. These are pretty regular. These are salaries, benefits, maintenance, the type of things that are increasing annually with inflation, but pretty predictable. The second type of costs are capital costs. These are a lot less predictable. And as you see here in the chart, the capital costs change year to year in a way that the operating costs do not. Capital costs are one of the main drivers in a lot of utility rate studies, and including these. And we've developed plans for each of your utilities to maximize debt and cash funding as appropriate going forward. So 2 different types of costs here that we're looking at. The first thing we're going to talk about here, and the main thing, is a revenue requirement. A revenue requirement is just an analysis of how much rate revenue you need in the door to cover your annual financing needs. What it results in is a rate adjustment strategy, a multi-year plan. We're going to look at 3 years here. Our models go much longer, and we wanted to focus on these 3 years for council's attention. There are a number of things that go into what is required in your annual revenue requirement. We have 4 categories here, and I want to first talk about financial policy impacts. There's a number of different financial policies we have included, and they're driving the needs in this case. One of them is the day's cash on hand. This is your operating minimum balance. So the idea here is if the utility revenues stop coming in tomorrow, how long can you operate without cutting levels of service? So this is kind of an industry standard thing we look at. We have recommended, different for each utility, because each utility has a different revenue stream. But we've recommended kind of a minimum days on hand of cash. The next one we looked at is a capital minimum balance. The capital minimum balance is really for unexpected emergency failures in your system. Maybe a pump fails, maybe a Vector truck dies, whatever it is. We've set up kind of a minimum capital balance target we want to achieve over the forecast period. So that's one of the other drivers here. And then the last one is both a financial policy as well as a industry kind of requirement. It's debt coverage ratio. Debt coverage ratio looks at the amount of revenue after you pay all your normal operating expenses that is available for debt service. The general standard is you want to have about 125% or 1.25 times your annual debt service in excess revenue. We've used that metric here planning forward. That is both a requirement of many of the loans you have, as well as something that lenders use to determine future interest rates when you're looking for new loans in the future. So that's a really important metric as well. Those are the kind of 3 main financial policy impacts we've looked at. Beyond that, we look at your O&M costs. Your O&M costs are just your budget going forward, your salaries, your benefits, your maintenance costs, all those normal, predictable annual expenses. We consider capital funding. Capital funding can be either in rate funded, it can be grants, it can be debt funded. How you balance that is something we're going to look at here. And then that's part of your annual expenses. And then last is your existing and then your new debt service. So anything going forward, we want to make sure we're accounting for that in your annual operating expenses. So that's your total annual revenue needs. We're going to dive in now first to water, and we're going to start with capital. So the water capital needs in the next 3 to 4 years are through 2024 are $36.7 million. You can see that there's a big capital plan intended for this coming year. And the other thing I want to call out here is we have delineated between general capital and development capital. So these green boxes are capital that's needed for growth going forward. And that's separated here on your graphic. The other thing I want to point out is that of this, the 36 million, 18 million is for main replacements. And that's really to reduce system leakage, which increases efficiency and lowers the energy usage, which is something Logan talked about earlier, and it is a really important goal for your system. Beyond that, we have of this total capital plan, about 22.5 million are SRF loan, state revolving fund, loan funded proceeds. We've got about 6.4 in ARPA grants coming in. So that's the American Rescue Plan Act. So a lot of grant revenue coming in. And then the remaining part is funded through development fees and rate revenue. When we look at what this means for kind of an annual revenue requirement question, I'm going to orient you to the graphic you're looking at here. We have up here at the top, these lines, those are your revenues. The solid one is your existing rate revenue and other revenues at your existing rates. And then the dotted one, the dashed one is what we're recommending. These revenues, as you can see, at your existing rate levels, don't meet your ongoing needs. And then when we look at the bars here, there's a couple different things to note here. Water is pretty unique in that it has a pretty large existing debt service portion. That's the debt service when you acquired the utility. It's still well under your existing rate revenue, but I wanted to point out that it is larger than you'll see in the other utilities. We have your cash operating expenses in the navy blue at the bottom. And then that gold portion there is your rate funded capital. And then we also have those reserve targets in that dark green at the top. The other thing about this slide is the bottom, that table. You'll see that your average monthly single family bill is about $42 right now. Going forward with our recommended rate increases, you're looking at about $1.26 to $1.20 or $2.28. So within a couple dollar range increase annually. So that would be the impact to your monthly bill on an annual basis. Right. This is the recommended rate impact. This is the rate schedule with those changes. I'll pause here for a moment so everybody can absorb what that means. Okay. Next, we're going to look at wastewater or sewer. Sewer has about 11.2 million in capital needs in the next 3 years, including this year. Of that, more than half, 7.8 million, is in the collection system, just investing in that older collection system, replacing pipes as needed. The funding for this capital plan is about 7.5 million in state revolving fund loans, about 2 million in ARPA grants, about 3 million in development fees, and then kind of the remaining portion is covered by rate revenue. I will also note that there is an investment here in the compost facility to meet those DEQ requirements going forward. For the sewer revenue requirement, you'll see this looks a little different than water. So we've got your cash operating expenses in that navy blue bar at the bottom. We have existing debt service, much smaller, a portion of your annual expenses than water here. And then we have kind of, as you stack up those expenses going forward, we have some new debt service, pretty minimal starting in 2023. We have some additions to meet those reserve targets that I think it's 60 to 90 days for sewer, as well as the capital fund minimum. And then there's also some rate funded capital. So you are spending some rates in your capital here. The thing I want to point out here is that your existing rate revenue, that black solid line here at the top, does not meet existing needs for expenses and debt service payments. So that's the most important thing here, is that you need these increases just to kind of cover your ongoing annual obligations before capital comes into it or any other expansions. At the bottom here, you'll see these increases range from about $1.40 to $1.70 monthly for your customers. So pretty minimal impact, under $2 per month on average, but they are increasing over time. This is the updated sewer rate schedule. Again, we see those increases each year, no change to the structure of the rate schedule, just the revenue requirement needs. Last, we come to stormwater. Stormwater has about 4.1 million in capital needs in the next 4 years. The biggest project here is a 2.2 million project in 2023. That's the South Hills Flood Control Project, and it is largely funded by ARPA grants. So the rest of this capital plan, we've got about $1 million in loans and bonds, about 500,000 in grants and contributions, and then the remaining about 500,000 is funded through rate revenue. So again, a good combination of different types of capital funding resources here, but largely ARPA funded. For the stormwater revenue requirement, again, this should look familiar by now. We've got your capital operating expenses in the navy blue at the bottom, your existing debt service, minimal debt existing for stormwater. But you'll notice that your existing rate revenue, that solid black line, doesn't cover much more than your operating expenses and existing debt going forward. So when you build in the new debt service for your capital needs, as well as any rate funded capital, and also building those fiscal policy reserves over time, we do see a need for a rate increase here. And as you look at that table at the bottom, you'll see what that means. It really, your stormwater rates are very low. So the increase monthly is, under 50 cents year over year as we look forward. This is then your stormwater rate table with those impacts. And then last, I wanted to show you the combined impact of those three different water, sewer, and stormwater rate changes. This is, you'll see here, it's the same collection of cities that we saw earlier during Logan's presentation. Missoula, we have both your 2021, so your existing rate structure, and then your 2024 projected rate increases here. They're both at the bottom of this chart. And one of the things there's a couple things I'd point out here. The first is that not everybody has a stormwater utility. The second is that your increases are still keeping you at the bottom of the overall range. And in combination with the three utilities, you're looking at about a $3 to at most $5 increase on average over the 3 years we're looking at. So, for the investment in your system you're looking at, so it's a pretty efficient use of rate revenue. And that's all I've got tonight. I wanted to open it up for questions if anybody has those. Mayor, I think you're gonna.
And thank you, Ms. Hobart. We'll take questions after we hear from anyone interested in the public. Logan or Jeremy, did you have anything else to add before we move to the public hearing?
I don't. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Melanie, if I could bug you to take down the slide. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I do have a comment. Chris Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Chris Rowe. I'm the chair of the City of Missoula's Energy and Climate Team. I work with Amber Sherrill to move forward the city's goals of carbon neutrality by 2025 and 100% clean electricity. I came on today to really promote and be thankful for what Jeremy and his crew have done with this. I spent an entire career doing water quality and watershed management and know how hard it is to keep our local waterways clean. But today I'm here to talk about carbon emissions. And I appreciate in this presentation, there are quite a few places where it is noted. One of the things that was noted was about 58% of the total emissions for the city of Missoula come from the water and wastewater treatment facility combined systems. So that's really the biggest place. So if you want to go hit the biggest bang for your buck, that's where you're going to go. It amounts to about 10,800 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And most of that comes from the water department, really the pumping of water, the moving of water out of the wells, up the hills, and all that stuff. And so if we can work to reduce that, that would be a tremendous opportunity. And so through what we've heard today is leakage is a real big issue. It's a great low bang for your buck, and additional revenue would help that. Increasing pump efficiencies, that would also help that. One of the goals, stated was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 10% in the next 5 years. Now, not that that isn't a problem, but I just wish to remind everybody here that the city of Missoula established a goal of 100% clean electricity by 2030. And also the city has established a goal of carbon neutrality for city operations by 2025. So we're running out of time there. Sometimes there's only so much you can do, but I think this effort that Jeremy and team have come up with, the ideas are really move us forward. The solar system out at the wastewater treatment plant being another one of those great things. Improvements on the system at the wastewater treatment plant and Garden City compost, where what we see is, when we compost this organic material from the wastewater treatment plant, and also where community members drop off their yard waste, is we're sequestering carbon. So there's an opportunity there where the more that is used, the more it's utilized, the more carbon is sequestered. So that's all good too. So all that said, myself and I've talked to Amber about this, we certainly support this rate increase, in particular as it concerns the reduction of energy usage and carbon emissions. So that's all I have. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Appreciate it. Thanks for your volunteer service as well. I see no additional hands up among attendees. Are there questions or comments from council members this evening? I see none. And you can yell at me if I'm missing you. So we will once again take this item up for final consideration next week. Public hearing will remain open, so opportunities to comment abound in the meantime. Our final public hearing this evening is a related item with regard to utilities, particularly water, and that is the staff assistance fee and the new tap fee. And Mr. McGinnis, is that your item?
Yes, it is. I don't have anything formal to present. I guess it's not a new tap fee. It's basically reducing an existing tap fee, but then the contractor will absorb the cost of providing the materials. So anyways, it's more about them being able to obtain the materials when they need them is kind of why we're making that change. I think why we're here today is because of the staff assistance fee. And that's, I think, for instances where a contractor or developer requests our assistance, I think an example that we see is the contractor, part of their work in installing a main extension is to make sure that the test or that the main is free of bacterial contamination. And so they flush the main after they install it, and they collect back T samples, and we perform a lot of work helping them out on those projects. But if a contractor hasn't been very careful and they've gotten a bunch of debris into the pipe, the tests can fail, and then we can be out there for hours assisting them, to resample or to reflush and resample their test. And we don't think it's really appropriate for all the other customers to be paying that time. So, we're happy to assist the contractor. We want these mains we want them to pass the tests and to be safe for the customers to obtain water from. But we also want them, if they haven't been able to get them to pass initially, we want them to, I guess, pay for our time and helping them do that. So it's a new fee that we're proposing. It's not going to affect any customers, right? This is only for contractors that are requesting our assistance.
Thanks, Logan. So for the sake of our audience, you are reducing tap fee from what to what?
Boy, trying to think where I'd find that information. I'm sorry, I should have been prepared for that question. Katie's on. Katie might be able to tell me where to find them if she doesn't have them.
And if we could just have that question answered for next week under final consideration, that's great. For purposes of folks wishing to comment, please understand that one fee is going down, and we're adding a brand new one that will only affect new construction as a function of contractors doing their work. So we'll get that information for you. With that, I'll open the public hearing, which again will remain open for a week. And our attendees we've got some attrition going on. And I see no hands up there. Are there questions from council members or comments? All right, seeing none, once again, we'll hold this item open and take it up next week under final consideration. Speaking of final consideration, that's our next agenda item. These items have had public hearing and have been vetted by council. And this evening, we will entertain a motion based on the item in committee, and we'll take comment before we vote. Our sole item this evening comes from Ms. Jones, Administration and Finance Committee.
Thank you. I would like to make the recommended motion, which is to adopt an ordinance to amend Missoula Municipal Code Chapter 2.82 entitled Establishment of Continuous Residency Requirements within the City Limits for City Departments and Head and Supervisory Managers. And I'd like to speak to it.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you. So I'm not quite sure how long ago, 8-10 years ago or so, this ordinance was put in place. With the best of intentions, I think. My understanding is, based on the history, it wasn't based on any specific situation, but it was just seen as a best practice to basically have department heads and people in certain positions within city government, besides electeds, having to reside geographically within the city in order to have them be invested in this city and in their job. However, now that we've had a few years for it to unfold and see how it worked in application, I think the consensus is that this didn't exactly go in the direction that we intended, that council intended years ago. And so it was time to not only revisit it, but probably revoke it. And in a nutshell, we've heard from human resources and first of all, there's a lot of information out there these days that basically, in order to have good department heads and good employees for the city, it's not really where they live, it's who you hire and how you manage them and the tools you give them. So I think that is front and center as a discussion point these days in terms of how to have the best product in terms of services for local government. And also, I think we saw some unintended consequences in that there are some very good people in the pipeline to be promoted, but because they had already set up a life somewhere outside of the city limits, their career track was negatively impacted by that. And so you start combining all these factors, and what was intended as a good idea 8 or 10 years ago didn't really unfold that way. So for that reason, sometimes you got to back it up and make some changes. So that's what we're doing with this. I'm in favor of it. I think we've got a lot of solid reasons to revoke it, and I respect the prior city councilors who were working hard on this, but it didn't really work the way they intended. So that's why we're having this discussion, and I think it would be good to revoke it so that we can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. I will also note that we do have a strategy for ensuring that folks who need to be able to respond quickly to either to City Hall or to emergent challenges in the community where we have a process and a policy for that as well. So we're buttoning up a few, tying up a few loose ends rather. So with that, comments from council members. Zasika?
Thank you. I also am in support of this. Usually folks that work, a lot of the rules that go on in the city, they're made by the legislative body, and that's us, the city council. So I can absolutely understand why folks that are in the city council, when they make the rules, they have to live with the rules that they make. But with the department heads, they are not a legislative body. They can live wherever they want as long as they're great at their job, and the department heads are wonderful at their jobs. So I would be happy to support this motion. And I also am really happy to that we have looked into prior council rulings and make sure that they're working for the future because of time changes. Change is the only constant in life. And so a lot of laws and rules could be looked at again. And I really appreciate all the hard work that everyone has done in this. So I will be in support tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening? Ms. Merritt?
I will also be in support, and one of my main motivations for supporting this is the idea of being able to continue to promote people who have had a long history of service to the city. It does not make any sense whatsoever that you've had someone who's worked for you for a long time and you'd like to promote them to a higher position, and but you can't do that because they live just outside of the city limits. So I think this is a much needed fix to a problem that, as Gwen said, I think was well-intentioned to begin with, but in practice, it doesn't serve us. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Anyone in the audience care to comment? And seeing none there, we will have a roll call vote.
Thanks, Merringen. Alderman Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Basika,
Yes.
Von Mossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
and Harp.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 9 ayes and 3 absent.
And if the motion is approved, we don't have any additional items for final consideration this evening. I don't have any communications. We'll start general comments from council members this evening with Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll save mine for next week.
Okay. Ms. Cheryl.
Pass, thank you.
Mr. Hess.
Pass, thanks.
Ms. Jones.
I will comment, take you up on that. I first of all wanted to congratulate the Grizzly football team for a great win. And there were a ton of people in town over the weekend spending a lot of money. So that's our synergy that we get from town and gown. And hey, I really appreciate the football team doing so well and going on to play this next weekend. So go Grizz. And I watched the game and I got a kick out of the fact that after the Grizzlies ran up a pretty high score and the commentators were trying to figure out stuff to talk about, they talked about the fact that we have bear alerts on campus periodically. They had never heard of that before. And I believe that there was a bear around dinner time over treed in a tree on the Oval just tonight. So, which the whole wildlife issue of having too many bears in town is a different topic of discussion, but I loved it that the commentators were just fascinated with the bear alerts on campus. So go Grizz.
Ms. Hart.
I'm going to pass tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Von Mossberg.
Pass, thank you.
Ms. West.
Pass.
Ms. Vasika.
I'll pass as well. Thank you.
And Ms. Merritt.
I just want to say congratulations to the Downtown Association for a very successful parade of lights downtown on Saturday night. There was a ton of folks out enjoying themselves, and it was a beautiful evening. The reverse parade, I would say, was a success. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. We have no committee reports this evening. We don't have any items of new business. Are there any additional items to be referred? Seeing none of those, any miscellaneous communications, reports, petitions, or announcements? Ms. Hart?
I just want to say, good to see you, Brian von Lossberg. We've missed you at the helm. Glad you're back.
All right, seeing nothing else happening for the good of the order this evening, as always, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.